Hey everybody, this is Ron Coughlin with the What's Your Story podcast, a podcast that focuses on generative AI and how we use AI in the work world today, as well as marketing and also in education of all places. So join us each week. This is now our fourth season, and we're going to be coming at you every week with different guests, like last year, guests from the marketing world, guests from the agencies, from places like Google, as well as from people who are experts in things like sponsorship. So join us each week for the What's Your Story podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Spotify and iTunes. Make sure you like the podcast, download the podcast. That'd be really helpful for us. We're trying to get up to 10,000 people. Anyway, looking forward to seeing y'all and looking forward to discussion and your comments about this awesome podcast, which everyone seems to be fascinated with. Have a great day. Bye for now. Well, welcome back to the What's Your Story podcast, generative AI version. And this is Ron Coughlin, your host, joining you once again this week. And, we've had some amazing guests so far this year from all over the disciplines of marketing and agencies and Google. And we've even interviewed AI, if you can believe that. But today I have a special guest joining us, Kim Skildum-Reid, and she's all the way from Australia, Sydney, Australia, if you can believe that. So welcome, Kim, to the What's Your Story podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm well. It's early in the morning here, and I'm going really well. Summertime.
Summertime. We got like 4 feet of snow on the ground right now, but that's okay.
Oh, I know. I've heard from family.
It's just crazy here this year. But anyway, more than we've ever had. But hey, listen, Kim, you're an expert in sponsorship. You've had your own company. Power Sponsorship. I have a background originally in sponsorship and I've watched some of your videos and used sometimes in education when I'm teaching students. But why don't you give us a flavor and a little background on your story and how you moved from all places of Minnesota to Australia and got into sponsorship of all things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm born and raised in Minnesota and on the North Shore of Lake Superior, so very close to the Canadian border. So, so if you know where Thunder Bay is,
I do.
Cross the border from that.
Actually, my first roommate in university was from Thunder Bay, if you can believe that.
There you go. There you go. And I went to uni in Minnesota and got a job after that because I didn't study anything in terms of marketing or business or anything like that. I was studying in the sciences, and I just didn't want to do that. I just felt like I wanted to do something else. And I sort of thought to myself, what do I like to do? And I loved sports, mad for sports, and still am. And then what am I good at? And I'd done some marketing, sort of on and off as a teenager and all the way through uni for my family business. And so it wasn't, like major stuff, but I really enjoyed it. And I thought, sports marketing, I wonder if there's any jobs in that, not having any idea that it was about to explode and the sponsorship thing was just really on the cusp of getting huge. And so I lucked in to something that I love and I actually had some talent for, because there's plenty of things that I love that I don't have any talent for. Sort of use my experience in America to sort of move overseas. And I've been in Australia for over 32 years. I've been in Sydney for about 27. I was in Melbourne before that. And so now I work all over the world, including in North America. And so, it's been fantastic. I highly recommend it. Sydney's fantastic. If you haven't been here, it's worth the flight.
Well, I almost moved there one time. I told you that, I think, at the beginning of the show before we got on the air, but we didn't end up moving there. And sometimes I regret that, but it looks like a beautiful place. Now, you are in sponsorship, but this podcast right now is looking at generative AI. And generative AI is a changing landscape. It's changing many different industries. And I think there's no difference on your industry, which is sponsorship on the client side, as well as those that are the agency side of the business. So why don't you give us a flavor on how generative AI is changing your world right now?
Okay, again, there's two sides of the industry, the two main sides of the industry, and then there's a ton of consultants like me sitting in the middle. So there's the rights holders; those are the people that are selling sponsorship. So sports organizations, festivals, museums, charities, associations, that kind of stuff. And then we've got the sponsors, or that's the brands, and sometimes those are media companies, and sometimes they're government, but most of the time, and most typically, they would be brands owned by a corporation. And how they're using generative AI differs in a number of ways. And so, for the rights holders, the people that are actually selling sponsorship, generative AI is a way to sort of shortcut their way to doing things best practice. So, one of the things that I've told literally for decades to rights holders is you need to research the sponsors before you go to them. Before you create anything for them, you really need to understand their brand and their target market. Mm-hmm. And that, used to entail, a half an hour, 45 minutes of slogging through their socials and their websites and, their ads and their packaging and all of that to try to figure out what they're focusing on. And there still is a little bit of that, and there still will be some gaps. But if you can actually, sort of ask a chat bot, like ChatGPT or something, how does this brand describe itself in Canada? Or, what is the brand personality as it's showcased in Australia? And it will come back and talk about and find a whole bunch of information, obviously, about how that brand positions itself. Again, this can be a little fiddly and there can be gaps, but that's just like a lot of good information really, really, really fast. So that's one way. Another way is that rights holders, oftentimes they don't understand how to create like a brand architecture or brand segmentation, because each of their properties, each of their events, each of their teams or whatever, they're all brands too, and they don't understand how to do that. And it's absolutely critical that they understand this stuff in order to be able to be a best practice sort of pitcher to sponsors. And so they can actually, go out and say, give me a few words and short phrases that describe the Italian festival Ferragosto in, in Sydney. And literally it will go out and find how people are describing it and how articles are describing it. Because oftentimes if the property belongs to you, you're too close. So you miss a bunch of stuff. So you can use that to augment your understanding of your sort of psychographics and the motivations for people to come along by asking things like, what are the main reasons why people attend, or what, that kind of thing. Yep. So that can help with segmentation. You can use it for brand matching and basically saying, okay, these are the attributes, the personality of my event, my team, whatever. Give me a list of brands that market themselves in this way, and then list a bunch of attributes. And so it can shortcut the hit list process. And then sponsorship proposals, like there are some places in sponsorship proposals that are just a plain flat pain in the ass. And I hate doing them. Like, there's a way to do best practice proposals. And the thing that I hate doing myself the most, which is a really critical part, is there's like an overview page that overviews the property. And you have to manage to hit this sort of tightrope between really painting the picture, but not pitching at all. Mm-hmm. And so there are some prompts that you can use that can actually get like ChatGPT or something similar to virtually write that page for you. And then all you have to really do is tweak it. The target markets that are in a proposal, those can come off of that segmentation that you've done before. But having having ChatGPT or something to try to write an entire proposal is just folly. It's not
Yeah.
going to work. At this point,
Yeah.
it's just really not. There are some really key aspects which will work and are great shortcuts. But just saying, write me a sponsorship proposal is going to end up with something that's 25 years out of date. Because I got to say, asking ChatGPT about sponsorship is going to net you a bunch of stuff that's 25 years out of date. It just is not good. So it's better to kind of go in a circle route and ask it about brands and ask it about matching brand attributes and things like that than to ask it about sponsorship, because I've tested this a lot. And if you say, can you write me a proposal, it ends up with gold, silver, bronze, and like all this stuff that is so outmoded and will turn a sponsor off straight away.
That's like 40 years old.
It's so bad. And yet it happens so often. And like there are so many people that purport themselves to be sponsorship experts that are still out there on the web saying you need gold, silver, bronze, and here's all the places where you can do a logo slap and all that kind of stuff. And that's what generative AI is picking from, is that mass of really old school thinking about sponsorship. So I don't recommend asking sponsorship questions at this time, as in how it works, and it's not good.
No, what's interesting is one of the key trends in any sponsorship activation is truly to create a niche environment, right, for that sponsor, so that they can activate their brand on site as well as get other benefits related to that sponsorship. So can ChatGPT assist in creating ideas or different creative matches for brands that make sense from a niche perspective?
Well, look, I mean, a brand can use a similar thing, and basically try to find things to sponsor through matching, which is kind of just the flip side of what I just said with the rights holders. But the thing with AI and sponsorship leverage, so people say activation, people say leverage. I use leverage because activation has, for some sponsorship professionals, sort of been narrowed to what you do on site and what you do in social, and that's it. And there's so much more to it. So now I say leverage, which includes activation.
Yes, okay.
But here's the thing. Sorry?
Thank you. That's good. Yeah.
So the thing with all emerging and improving technology, and generative AI is right in there, it's right at the top of the list in terms of leveraging a sponsorship, is that it is a tool to achieve the same things that best practice sponsorship has been trying to achieve for some time. So best practice sponsorship should be win-win-win. So the goals for sponsorship are, to change people's perceptions, change their behaviors, and build alignment. And the way that happens is through adding value to the fan experience, and that includes the remote fan experience. So, and adding value to the customer experience, and demonstrating brand attributes and demonstrating alignment to those fans. And so when you're talking about AI, you've got to say, not how cool is this, what can we do with AI, and just look for some butte idea. You have to start with, how can we add value to this experience? How can we provide an experience that is really hyper customized for them? How can we create an experience that is additive? And so, one of my favorite tools for sponsorship leverage is augmented reality, because it adds to the experience that they're having, as opposed to kind of just being awkwardly bolted on. And so sometimes you see, some leverage things that use AI, and they're just kind of ham-fisted. And but there are some amazing things. And one of the first kind of iterations of this amazingness happened with Lay's potato chips and Lionel Messi. Do you remember that one?
Okay, yeah.
And it was a little awkward. There were a lot of limitations. It could have been done so much better, even just now, a few years later. But basically, with UEFA, soccer.
Yeah, I know.
Lionel Messi did customized messages via face matching to people using their names, using various phrases or
Okay.
motivations and all of this kind of stuff. And it worked. It was very popular. It worked really, really well. And again, it was awkward. Like I tried to do one and I could have Kimberly or Kimmy, but somehow not Kim. So
They would call me Ronald then. That'd be a problem,
Ronald,
probably.
there you go. But so you got to start from this position of, if we want to do something that's really, that's really useful to people, that adds real value and isn't just a gimmick, that's where you got to start with. And then this technology has so much scope for it's hyper customization. And I like the idea of and I've done this a couple of times, where you crowdsource words or you crowdsource feelings, and then you use generative AI to create artwork or music
Right.
or something
Yeah.
like that around that. So it's like everybody that did participate feels a bit of ownership in that. And so there's tons of ways to actually use this technology, but you got to start with, does this add real value to their experience? Does it give them a functional or emotional benefit? Does it make them feel more a part of the experience? Does it show alignment with them and what they care about? And if you start with those, which are the basic building blocks before AI was like ever a part of our lives, then you'll use it right.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of our other guests that have come on have said it's really garbage in, garbage out, right? So what you're inputting into this tools that you have there, you need to really watch it and make sure you adjust it over time. Now, if you're thinking about one of the really important parts, so I was a client. We did a lot of sponsorship for Tim Hortons. I don't know if you know Tim Hortons,
Yep,
one
I
of the
do.
largest fast food brands in
Shop.
Canada. And my role was to, really the regional side of marketing and sponsorships. And we would sponsor the NHL, but we started right from the ground level with Timbit Sports, which we sponsored all the teams related to hockey and soccer in Canada and in parts of the U.S. And so, when I was there, we always had to come up with different ideas to activate those things. And generative AI could have assisted us, but one of the most important things we always looked for in evaluating sponsorship proposals that were coming in is that it fit our brand. And secondly, did it deliver an ROI, a return on investment? So have you seen generative AI and its usage and how it might assist in that regard?
In
Generative AI? Sorry, return on investment, sorry.
I think that AI is useful for analyzing data.
Okay.
The problem is that most sponsors still, unfortunately, are measuring the wrong things in the wrong ways and not using their own benchmarks. And so if they're measuring the right things in the right way, then it can help to analyze big batches of data. But I'm not actually the biggest fan of just saying, okay, how can we measure with AI? I mean, there are aspects that AI can help with, like, social sentiment.
Well, that's fascinating, Kim. I mean, you've been talking a lot about generative AI and how we use it in the sponsorship world and specifically to return on investment. And one of the things you were chatting to us about with this idea of analyzing the data and using that effectively to, show that return. Maybe you can expand on that again a little bit for us.
Okay, so when you're talking about sponsorship and sponsorship measurement, you're not actually measuring the sponsorship. Like there might be a few little things, but for instance, if you're Coca-Cola, you'd be measuring how much Coke you sold. So that's measuring the sponsorship. But most of the time, what you're actually doing is measuring the leverage. So what you do with the sponsorship. And because leverage really only works when it's really multifaceted, you need to be prepared to measure it in a bunch of multifaceted ways against benchmarks. So it's like if you're a bank and you're trying to build trust and you've got brand tracking that asks people about trust, you would ask 2 or 3 of those same questions, exactly the same questions of people that went to an event or follow the event on socials or are members or donors or something like that, to see if you've actually moved the pin based on those benchmarks that you've got. And sales has benchmarks, and we in terms of if you do a retail promotion, they have benchmarks on how many, what percentage of key retailers actually usually pick up those promotions. And maybe this is going to be more, or maybe they sell more incrementally or whatever. So a sponsorship measurement report tends to be very, very multifaceted. Mm-hmm. And if you're measuring something using AI now, like social sentiment or something like that, then you can certainly use that as a framework to measure the shifts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's but you're never going to be able to, I should never say never when it comes to technology. But at the moment, you can't feed all of that in to some formula and get something that says you spent $400,000 and you got like $1.3 million in return. I mean, there are some things that you can measure in money, but a lot of things you can't. So, and so that's folly whether AI is involved or not. But there are, again, several aspects where AI can be very useful at the moment. There may become more aspects, but I think that sponsorship measurement is always going to be multifaceted, and there's going to be a mix of methods for doing that measurement.
Very true. One of the things that you were talking about earlier with the Messe experience is a way to enhance the fan experience from a sponsor's perspective. How might generative AI actually be used to enhance that fan experience and the attendance of different fans at a sponsored event?
Well, I did a workshop not too long ago, and one of the ideas that we came up with because we do this big brainstorm around, what could a sponsor do with this? And one of the things that we came up with was, and it was around a team, was that for all the fans of the team, could the sponsor create something using generative AI where several of the players sing happy birthday personalized to somebody? And that is with face mapping and all of that kind of stuff, that shouldn't be difficult to do using AI. And yet, if you're a fan and you've got this personalized happy birthday landing in your inbox, or you're tagged in socials, I mean, you'd be pretty happy with that,
Yeah, that's true.
Or your kid gets one. I mean, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so, so you can do things that are just really simple like that can add value. And it's like, that's that hyper customization thing that AI is very good at.
Yeah. So in Canada and the US, we're going to have the World Cup coming here in 2025. And it's a big event here for Toronto. I mean, we had the Pan Am Games here in 2016 and basically closed down the city for it. And
holy moly,
it was unbelievable. But so it's going to be that way, even in a bigger way, I think, when it comes here.
I mean, we did last year before, we had the Women's World Cup, and that was crazy down here. And the Men's World Cup is likely to be even more crazy for you.
And for us, Canada's now in it. The men's team, they're actually good enough to be in it, that they've qualified to be in it too, which is
our Matildas got pretty far along, which was great. So yeah.
But a lot of brands are going to want to jump into the fray and get exposure through these games and really try to enhance their own brand. Obviously, if it lines with their target audience and that. And so, generative AI can play a role in creating ideas. Or what kind of tools do you think a brand should be using to help them with some of those ideas to create a unique experience at an event like that?
Look, again, I don't think AI is going to help them come up with a lot of ideas.
Okay.
I mean, I tried and tried for literally days to get some good leverage ideas. I was like thinking, I'm going to find some magic prompt that and it's basically giving me only ideas that are really old school. They're like really old school. Like, they could do this and slap a logo on it. They could.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really super, super old school. And so I still think that leverage idea generation, the best way to tackle that is through design thinking. So there's a lot of analysis, and the AI can help with analysis, where there are synergies between the retail the brand and the property. So you do a lot of analysis, so you really understand the fan experience and why the fans care, and what the experience is like, and all of that, to develop empathy. And then you go through a process of really unbridled creativity, because if you've got the empathy and you understand all of the tools that you have at your disposal, then the creative ideas are going to be really creative. Like, they're going to be really doable and really creative. And so when you're coming up with those ideas, the AI stuff is going to just naturally come in there. It's like sort of, if you develop empathy in part by saying, okay, if you gave this segment a magic wand, what would they want from a sponsorship? What would they want from this event, this team, this whatever? If they had a magic wand and could have anything, and it's like, then in the creativity, it's like, okay, can you actually get that thing? Can you create that for them? Can they, if one of their things is that they want to have a closer relationship with the team, could you use generative AI to create something that is really unique and connects them with the team in a way that they would share, the way that they'd appreciate? So generative AI becomes one of many tools. Okay. And it's powerful, and it's flexible, and every week there's new things that it can do. So,
that's true.
But in terms of actually coming up with the ideas, I think that's going to stay human for quite a long time.
That's a good thing, I think.
Yeah.
So specifically generative AI, there are a lot of different tools and technologies. What's your, I guess, which are the ones you're most excited about anyway?
Look, I like ChatGPT for research. Research is, and like that's really pretty good. As long as you're not asking it, sponsorship questions, because it's terrible at that. Yeah. So it's stuck in about 1994. Right. But I also really like the AI in terms of being able to scale creative around, creative around a leverage program, creative for those rights holders to actually drive more love for their brand. And so I think that it makes that a really efficient process, so it only requires very small tweaks to sort of to get it right. So, sometimes you just press the button and you get 15 things and they're all perfect. And sometimes you got to fix up a few of them. But I think that is a really good way to use it. And the generative video is going to be really something else as well. So, I think that that's probably lagging a little bit at this point, but there are some engines for that are pretty good. And so generative video, I think, is going to be a huge thing in sponsorship.
Yeah, I mean, it is in digital marketing right now. A lot of my interns at Brandon are using it to create content for our clients, and it looks amazing. And I teach at a college here, and one of the things we do is a lab where we're using Invideo.io, and we have them create ads. And one group of students did it, and I was just blown away within an hour time frame what they came up with. It would look so professional, so it's very cool.
One of the things that I like to do with grassroots portfolios, sort of like a sponsor is sponsoring hundreds of things at the very grassroots level, and they're all very small, and it would be unrealistic to try to leverage each of them individually. So we put an umbrella over the top of it and we leverage them as a group, like one giant sponsorship. And as part of that, I get the sponsors to, negotiate in their contracts so that these rights holders are creating video, and they give them some some parameters for that. And we're not looking for anything beautiful. We're looking for something that's real, real and grassroots and, heartfelt and all that stuff. And generative AI, I think, is going to be very useful for wrangling clips of those things together into a cohesive whole, so that if you end up with 200 of these things, it can mix and match,
Yeah.
6 or 7 of them into various formats of video that create shareable and durable content. So I think that is another way that we'll see generative AI in terms of generative video, pulling together, sort of this mass of raw material that comes out of these big these big grassroots portfolios, and make that into something useful with a minimum of human interaction. I mean, doing that as without AI, well, it's great, it works, but it could be very arduous and time consuming, as opposed to getting AI to take the first pass and then fixing it up.
That's so true. Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, there's some very vast limitations to what it can do right now. But one of the interesting tools out there today is something called Character.ai. It's a former Google employee who went off and created this. And generally, I actually interviewed one of the characters I created in there. I could see that being used as a leveraging tool on site, where you create characters that interact with fans and have this real life discussions, but they're AI discussions with individuals, with real life people. And that could be fascinating. I'm sure it could be done, but you'd have to figure it out and make sure it worked and test it, and everything else, like everything else that's out there. So listen, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been a great half an hour of discussion from all the way across the world. If you had a magic ball and you were thinking about your craft and sponsorship, and both the right side and the client side, the brand side, where do you think this generative AI is going in the next 5 years?
Look, I mean, in terms of what new things it can do, how long is a piece of string, as we'd say down here in Australia? Like, we don't know. It could be like 1,000 times more flexible and powerful. We don't know. But what we do know is, within the next year or 2 years, it's just going to get nothing but better and easier to use for the things that it's kind of doing now. And so I think that the key things are, don't use it unless it's giving you high quality output. I mean, keep an eye on it, because that's changing all the time. So, but don't use it unless it's giving you reasonable quality output.
Yeah.
And always, as new things come along, don't just get dazzled by this new tech and how cool it is, and like, how you beaut is that. And instead of getting dazzled by that, what you want to do is go back to the basics. How can we use this to add value? And if there's all the ideas you're coming up with are kind of round peg, square hole, then it's like, okay, let's just sideline that. There may be another sponsorship we can use that for. There may be another angle, or we may need to wait just a little bit longer for that to get perfected before it's right for us. So again, go back to that framework as the new stuff emerges, as things really improve, and then revisit it.
Well, you know what? Right out of the mouth of the sponsorship expert of the world. I mean, that's incredible. So listen, if someone wanted to get a hold of you and hire you and hire your consulting firm in sponsorship, where can they reach you, and how do they do that?
Okay, well, I mean, you can just Google my name and you'll find me, but because I'm like the only Skildum-Reid on the planet. but,
Yeah.
but my website is powersponsorship.com,
Okay.
and there's oh geez, over 150 how-to blogs on there, and there's a number of recent ones that are about emerging and improving technology, about
Yeah.
AI, about big data, and things like that. So that's pretty useful, and all the details are, and that there's video tutorials and all sorts of free resources on there, and as well as what I do and how to contact me.
Very good. Well, it's been a pleasure. Very nice to meet you finally, because I
Lovely to
feel like
meet
I
you
already knew you
too.
because I watched some of those videos, but that's okay. And I really want to thank you for joining the What's Your Story podcast, generative AI version. And I wish you all the best. And maybe we'll see you at the World Cup. Maybe you'll be here in North
You
America. Who
never know. Thank you
knows?
so much for inviting me, Ron. This has been lovely.
Thank you.